Here we are back in Nova Scotia, Canada at the solar house. It's early October, and I just want to give a little more detail about the house and how it works, and a few things on a dug well here. Some of the sustainable features of the house and yard. It's a dug well, so if the power ever goes out, you can always simply throw a bucket down, or if the pump gives out on you, you can always grab a bucket of water for drinking water, that sort of thing. Out around the yard, you'll see there's a number of trees and stuff planted. There's a chestnut tree over here. Down below, there's, let's see, what do we got? There's a cherry tree, a blueberry bush there. This is a peach tree out in front. Another blueberry, apple tree. It's a number of fruits and vegetables that are perennial, that will come back every year. Won't have to worry about them. A few flowers. And one of the reasons for planting the cherry tree, because we don't want a lot of windows on the north wall. We only have 3 on this whole north side of the house. Have to do something to break it up. We added this rock, a few trees and that sort of thing. Some of the landscaping features here to make it a little bit less boring on the north side, and at the same time not have a lot of heat loss through this north wall. Just going to step inside. The house isn't quite complete, but it allows us to see some of the features. That's actually not a good spot to show it. Over here we show the thick walls of the house. So we have 10-inch thick walls here, if you can see. So what you have is a 2x6 standard construction, and then the second 2x4 wall is stood up behind it. It is 2x4, and there's a space in here. Now this is all filled with insulation. Now typically you wouldn't try to line up the structural members. The insulation inside is much better insulating than wood, so the heat passes through the wood. Heat passes out through the wood fairly easily. So once you get away from here, where you have to line up the timbers, the 2x4 lumber, once you get further back into the wall, they're not lined up. So as the heat passes through this first piece of lumber, it hits pretty well only insulation till the outer wall. So the chances of the heat getting through are much less. So that's about a 10-inch thick wall on all the exterior walls except the south wall. This is the south wall here, out into an unheated sun space. So there's no heat storage to speak of in this sun space, called a low mass sun space. The heat from the sun on the south comes into here, rises up into the attic, where it's stored or blown down into the rest of the house. But you do have this insulated wall behind you. So this is a mostly glass, which is a fairly terrible insulator. But you have an insulated wall behind it, so that at night time, say in the winter, that the heat inside the house has to get through this wall and then through this wall before it can actually escape the house. So it provides great insulation. It allows us to control the amount of heat coming into the house, so it doesn't overheat in the summer and it doesn't cool off too quickly. And the other neat thing about this, if you look at this sun space here, you could add this on to an existing house or an existing design fairly easily. If this was an outside wall, you're insulated, put a little sun space on it. It doesn't have to be big enough to get in and sort of sunbathe in the winter time, but it could be, as this one is. So let's see what else we got from here. You can see the pond. Now there's a few things about the pond. We've got some trout out in there. As far as sort of multiple benefits, we could eat trout out of the pond if we needed to. They eat some bugs, the trout do. The water is just downstream. You can see somewhat. There's a bit of a garden out there, small one right now, but the garden is actually sort of down gradient from the pond, so you could actually siphon water out to the pond if you had to. It's certainly close, it's a short distance to carry anything, to carry water. There's also another pond kind of out in the woods as well. That again, there's some fruit trees out back. So rather than carry Rather than carry water out to them, why waste the energy? You can just carry it a very short distance or siphon it. So the other thing I mentioned before, this is your west wall here in the northern hemisphere. There's just one little window here. So during the summer, the sun is long days, of course, and it's the hottest part of the day. The sun is beating on this west wall, and there is only just this one small window up there for that heat to get in through. So that saves it overheating. It goes to comfort as well as energy savings. I guess one of the other features of the house, I guess it's not small, it's not huge, but it's not small either. And some people like to, try to live in smaller dwellings, but it's set up so that here above the garage there's kind of an ensuite. That could be a teenager suite or an in-law suite or something like that. The basement area is plumbed in. It could have a bath. You could have a mother-in-law or a teenager or something, extended family living in there, and then that would still leave you with this main part of the house, which kind of has a kitchen, bathroom, everything on the main floor for main floor living, and upstairs there's still 2 bedrooms, and then if it's all connected together, you'd have 3 bedrooms upstairs, and the 2-car attached garage as well. So it's built to be flexible. The main floor is livable. If you were incapacitated, you could live on that first floor. The den would become your bedroom. So lots of flexibility. There's also, I can't really see it, but this panel here, again, this is still the south wall, of course, as you can see from all the glass. We're not quite done siding this, but it is fall. We'll soon be uncovering the air panel. So what you have is a glass panel with a brown absorber in there to absorb the sun. The heat from this one goes up into the upstairs attic space and then moves into that area there to provide heat during the winter. One of the other things I think I forget to mention about the pond, much the same as snow does in the wintertime. So this would be the south in the winter where the sun would be in the sky. It actually would reflect off this pond and up onto either the glass upstairs or this air panel we were just looking at there. It's not a huge pond, but having water in front of a south wall, that is a south wall in the northern hemisphere, where you're trying to collect heat, will provide you a little extra boost from the sun because it's reflecting off the surface. The same when it's all snow out here in the wintertime, it provides the same effect. But before you have your snowfall down, a pond or a water body out in front of your south wall is not a bad idea. So I guess my point on this pond, I talked about it from inside and out here, is that it can provide food, it can provide water for the garden with virtually no power. It can provide firefighting capability. If you fire truck had to back in here and pull water to here to put out yours or your neighbor's house. Recreation. It has many purposes. Reflection of the sun up onto the house. So it's neat to kill 3 or 4 birds with one stone, if you will. And just out in the little garden I was mentioning, there's not much here. The tomatoes are still doing good. Celery, there's a few things that are going into October here now. These are Jerusalem artichokes, which I haven't even looked at, but they're supposed to produce a little tuber. Here we go. Wow, very tiny. These little tubers are Jerusalem artichokes. It's another crop. This used to be a little area of potatoes. We've already picked them, but these Jerusalem artichokes are still growing, and it looks like they've produced small. This is more so something you'd plant than eat, but there's probably some bigger tubers under there. We're trying to get into some perennial vegetables. This is sort of kind of a typical garden, your corn and squash and cucumbers and those sorts of things, tomatoes, but looking to get into more so these perennial styles of vegetables. to go along with the sort of your normal types of fruit trees you would see around here. This is actually the septic field for the house, so there's nothing sort of planted edible down below this area, but we do have a couple of fir trees here that will shape up for Christmas trees to sell or to use or to give to friends. So any of the nutrients that might sneak out of the septic field, I'm not crazy about using that for food that I might eat, but it's great extra nutrients for things like Christmas trees. Back in here we sort of have a road laid out, some firewood to be, where we've planted a few things. Sea buckthorn there didn't really grow this year, but we're hoping it'll come back. We've got a hazelnut there, a white walnut, what do you call that, a butternut, and there's a couple more of those. It's a bit dark in here. You can see there's still quite a bit of overhead cover. In this case, the land was fairly forested before we developed it, so it's not really bright enough for fruit trees perhaps, but in the first year or two it provides them protection from wind and that sort of thing. There's also kind of a pile of rubble here that we hope to develop into some kind of a planting. Here's a plum. Again, here's the other pond I alluded to. So this plum, although the deer have been taking their fair share off this side, it's getting high enough that they can't reach it, and hopefully that will make some pears next year. Here's this other small pond, runs down from the larger one. Again, if you want to water this tree, it's crazy to carry it from up there if you don't have to. Just kind of follow a ditch downstream, and you know, as we add more plantings, we may put more ponds out there. And here we have an apple. Oh yes, the deer have been back. So here we have an apple that's been pretty badly browsed by the deer here. You can hardly see it. And this is a pea shrub, Siberian pea shrub. So they're a nitrogen fixing plant. So they're going to fix nitrogen out of the air, which becomes available to the apple tree beside it for some of its nitrogen requirements. You can see there's all kinds of, through the wood, sort of little fungi, mushrooms growing here. And here's a wild looking one. So it still retains its forest nature. So trees and shrubs, we tend to plant them in our lawn or on an old field. They like woodland, sort of fungus dominated kinds of environments, and this is one from the start. Over time, as I said before, it's a little bit the crown cover is a little bit thick for growing these, but over time some of these will succumb to disease. They'll get blown down, because when you open up a forest area, a lot of these things will they just don't have the root structure to hold themselves up. Here's a pear that's doing pretty well for October, still got lots of leaves. The deer have been pruning it for me. Another pea shrub there. We've got another apple that's looking pretty good, and a pea shrub. Actually, the pea shrub, you can see this. Here's the apple, and the pea shrub has actually grown higher than the apple. So maybe it's a better spot for pea shrubs than apples. This is a ginkgo biloba tree here, starting to turn a nice yellow for the fall. Another apple, another pea shrub. Also tucked in here, we've got a tilia, lime trees, one name. Anyway, the leaves themselves are actually edible, so it's about the only tree around this part of the world where you can actually eat the leaves. Had a few, they're okay. Got a gooseberry here. These do kind of like shady environments, so this should do well once it gets going. Back up through here, we got another blueberry tucked away. There's kind of an open space in here where we might put a greenhouse one of these days. This is a pawpaw that's actually doing all right. The deer had cleaned it right off last year, but it's bouncing back. So they're supposed to be kind of a low disease plant that obviously has survived one winter, and seems like it'll do well here. A few other things. There's rhubarb, which is perennial. The raspberries haven't really done well. There are strawberries in this mess, but we get a few strawberries every year. Oh, this is a Saskatoon berry that hasn't done very well at all, but it's just one of a number of berries. Wow, a dead mole. Okay, lots going on out here. There's frogs in the pond, a nice little sun shower. We have a little nursery area over there. We've been planting out a few things and trying to get as much as our food off of this property as we possibly can. Because again, just kind of circle back to the overall picture. In this part of the world, anyway, a big part of your energy use, your carbon emissions, or whatever you want to call it. A few more things here: kiwi and serviceberry, hawthorn. A big part of your energy emissions, carbon emissions, are from space heating. So we haven't seen any solar electric panels, solar hot water. Those are all quite expensive, just quite expensive, really. And the biggest part of your sort of household energy bill will be for space heating. So that's why the focus has been on passive solar, 100-year-old technology. It's just glass and insulation, lots of insulation. So the house is geared up to really need very, very little in the way of space heating energy. So then you could even take your savings from not having much of a heat bill. I am going to put in a wood stove, small wood stove as well. Then over time you can add on those things. You can add on a windmill, you could add on solar electric panels, solar hot water panels. But if you build a house without enough insulation, it's going to be losing heat out through those walls for many, many years to come. And then, so the other thing, I guess, back to this little guy, our Jerusalem artichoke, some of the plants here, it's surprising how much energy goes into food production. So if you can produce food in your backyard, in a pond, if you have it. I mean, we dug this one, this actual pond. This pond really started out as this ditch, I guess, which is buried with gravel at the moment. Started out with this ditch, which really was to prevent the water from coming downhill and kind of flooding out our construction site. So this was really an interceptor ditch, just to get the water away so that working in this clay wasn't going to be any bigger a mud pie than it had to be. And so we dug it out. I actually used it for backfill. So the clay that came out of here was just used to backfill to save hauling it in from somewhere else, which saved energy again. So if we can grow enough food around here, not have an electric bill, we can save money, reduce our emissions, and hopefully have enough money left over to put a nice windmill up there perhaps someday, some hot water panels, some electric panels there, or perhaps on a gazebo or something out in the yard, and be not self-sufficient, not really what I'm going for, but to have a lot of food and not have huge electric bills. Anyways, hopefully you've enjoyed this little tour. Hopefully it made sense. If you have any questions or anything else, give me a shout. One last note: now that it's later in the fall, these operating windows on the bottom are closed, and there's a little flap there on the top that when the house warms up, some of the excess heat goes out of the structure so it doesn't overheat. Soon that will be closed over for winter, and we'll insulate that space up there, and so all the heat that's generated in behind this glass will rise up, and we'll blow it down into the house or store it for nighttime use. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed this. Take care.